Hello and welcome back to Snafu. Today's conversation was recorded live at the Snafu conference in March of 2026 with former CEO and co-founder of Udemy, now co-founder and CEO of Maven, Gagan Biyani. Please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation about founder-led sales and growth in the age of AI. My guest today, Gagan Biyani. You've probably heard of Udemy. His company today is Maven. We're going to get into both of those and a lot more. But before you take your seats, let's give a warm round of applause to today's guest, Gagan. All right. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. There we go.
So I've been a fan from a distance, and more recently, I was fortunate enough to be an early investor in Maven. But how many people here have heard of Udemy? Right, everybody. How many of you have heard of or used Maven? Okay, a couple, right? Maybe half of the audience. You are very interesting to my mind for more than both of those companies, but because you have built your career around a topic that I think is increasingly valuable in the age of AI, which is growth. So from co-founding and leading Udemy to Sprig, which we'll talk about, and I was a food delivery driver for Sprig for a couple of weeks in the early days.
Thank you.
Helping to launch Lyft in LA and writing what was essentially the Lyft launch playbook, all the way through to seemingly from the outside or the somewhat outside, cracking the code on education tech in a really new and novel way, and doing something in edtech that I think is particularly hard to do. So maybe as a place to start, what is growth? What is the difference between growth and marketing? And what is it that you say that you do particularly well? I'm also going to move the flowers out of the way so I can see you better.
Growth is a form of marketing. Marketing is the umbrella term. It's the term that's existed forever. And the idea with growth is to say, hey, there was a marked difference between what marketing was like pre the internet and post full internet adoption. And specifically, it's as you have a lot more data, you can be far more analytical. Because you have software, you can use product to build growth loops instead of messages and brand campaigns. And finally, because the internet is a purely digital medium, it has different mechanics of how things grow in the first place. And so the discipline of growth is really just an acknowledgement that marketing evolved a lot. And the old school playbook didn't apply as well to modern tech companies.
I feel like the question I'm about to ask is like saying telemarketing is marketing when it's actually like the worst kind of sales. But why not just call it internet marketing, right? Internet marketing, like telemarketing, doesn't mean what those words together should mean. But what is growth in your worldview that marketing is not?
Growth is more of a system than marketing is. Marketing traditionally has been about branding a product for the customer and then also about distributing that product. But growth marries those two in a way that's really unique because it actually involves changing the product itself. And because it is a sort of seamless experience between setting up your brand and then editing the product and then the actual like outbound marketing, if you will, whether that's paid or social or whatever, because that is now fully integrated, growth is capable, and the growth teams were capable of basically like building out growth models that would allow you to mathematically determine the sort of like input output mechanics of any action that you were going to take. And so it like just feels like a fundamental difference in the way you think. And so, yeah, you could have called it internet marketing, but it's not marketing applied to the internet. It's a new form of thinking of things. And most growth marketers or growth professionals would not succeed in a traditional marketing role and vice versa. Certainly not in the 2010s. I think things have evolved since then, but that's sort of where it started.
I want to do a little bit of your career chronologically, right? So I want to start with questions about Udemy, and then we'll go into Lyft and then Sprig, and then a little bit more current. But maybe along the way, we'll probably zoom out and zoom in to sort of some of the topics and where they apply at that time or where they apply now. Before we go to Udemy, one of the questions that I hear from salespeople, friends, from non-salespeople is the concern about manipulation. Is whether we're talking about growth or marketing, or Niels, who was in my last session, talks a lot about Lulu, who talks about founder-led comms, and right, comms is yet another discipline that could kind of be added to this mix. But this idea of if we are communicating about our businesses, if we are leading comms for a startup or for our own, whatever it is, our own careers, how do we do so without feeling manipulative, without being manipulative? So what is your broad thought about manipulation as it comes to these different disciplines we're talking about?
I mean, manipulation is completely unavoidable. Everything you do is a form of manipulation. You invited me here and you were asking me questions on stage. In some level, you are manipulating me, I guess. I mean, you are manipulating me, but I'm totally party and take agency in my own part in this. And so, personally, I think it's just completely ridiculous. I don't really. I think there's like a lot of guilt like permeating throughout thinking that is super. It's actually the guilt is intended to reduce toxicity, but actually I think it's created a lot of toxicity. And guilt around manipulation is like a great example. Like I don't force anyone to buy my product. Like I literally like I just put it out there and people come in and take it, and I'm giving them more reasons. I'm explaining why. But that doesn't inherently mean I'm being manipulative in the negative sense. I am manipulating on some level, but in the negative sense. And I think fears around these types of things are exactly what prevents success. I don't think many successful people are constantly worried about all the 15 million things they could possibly be doing to step on someone's toes. And fears over manipulation are one of those 15 million things. I think people who are successful generally believe in themselves, they believe in what they're providing to the world, and they provide it and they let people decide what they want to do with it.
My first mentor in sales said, just trust that each person you're talking to is their own best expert, right? I grew up a very sensitive kid. I was very reluctant, as I shared on stage this morning, at selling. When I first got into personal training was where I started. And I was very much afraid of stepping on people's toes, right? And it was the advice repeated over and over in small steps over several years of just assume that the person you're talking to knows what's best for them. And then manipulation, to your point, actually becomes impossible.
Yeah, it shows a lack of respect for the other person's agency to say that you're manipulating them every time you put out a sales note. I mean, there are forms of manipulation that are quite pernicious, but it's a very, very small percentage of all sales and marketing material out there. And it's, and just avoid not being extreme about it. I mean, we actually talk about this at Maven because Maven essentially, we're helping people upskill on AI, and there's a lot of doom and gloom with AI that people feel. And so we have constant conversations about the line at which the line you don't cross, which is I'm very in favor of us saying, hey, you feel overwhelmed. AI is everywhere. You don't know what's going to happen. Like it's changing all the time. Like I feel that too. I'm happy to say that that's a reason you should consider using Maven to solve that problem, make you feel. But there's a there's a line that gets crossed when you say you're going to lose your job. Use Maven. And honestly, that line in social media is so easy to cross. Like my team sometimes writes posts for me, and I'm like, no, like we will not say that. We will not go to the point of like being so aggressive that it's cringe, essentially. Um, and I don't think of that as like an anti-manipulation thing. I think of it as just like cringe. Like it's not a good look. I don't think it's actually effective manipulation. So I wouldn't do it anyways. I think it's much better people are not going to buy, in our case, people are not going to buy training if they're so fearful for themselves that they don't want to do anything and they want to put their heads under a cover. So we actually have to give them optimism, but it is natural. And I see why some people do uh, feel like they could end up manipulating someone if they were doing marketing badly, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm the poster boy of somebody who spent so much of my time for a decade afraid of stepping on toes, right? And that in many ways that held me back. So I'm fiercely curious about how do we help people not feel guilty in that way for taking action. And I love what you said about it's actually insulting somebody else's agency.
Yeah. Thank you.
With Udemy, what was it that you did to grow the user base? What was the moat at Udemy in that era? So take us back there. Tell us a little bit about the landscape and what you did differently.
Yeah. So, I mean, 2008 is when I started working on Udemy, 2008, 2009. It's kind of a lifetime ago in internet years. At that time, YouTube was not even a regular source for educational material. Like, you cannot go on YouTube and reliably find an answer to an educational question like, how does algebra work, or what is geometry? In fact, the internet was pretty nascent in a sense. I mean, it was 2010, it wasn't 2000, but it was nascent from an educational standpoint. So there were very, very few ways for a user or a person who wants to learn how to code, for example, or learn how to use AI in the modern parlance, or learn internet marketing. There were very few, even just like web pages on that subject, right? And like, so what we started with was, but the other thing that was happening was there were a bunch of these internet marketplaces that were starting up in that era and just before us that were really successfully bringing on massive amounts of supply in a new category, right? And the examples at the time that some people remember are like, I think StubHub. I think StubHub's pre 2008. I'm trying to remember if it was another ticketing site or if it was StubHub, but I think it was StubHub. There was eBay, of course, Craigslist. There were all these, and then there was Odesk and Elance were starting to become quite big. I think those were started in 2000, like a couple of years before this. And then in our era, there was an explosion of marketplaces, right? The best example is Airbnb, which was started just a year before Udemy. And then, of course, Kickstarter, and just so many others. And so what we saw was, hey, there's not a lot of information right now on the internet that's educational. What if we brought that online? And the original idea with Udemy was to bring it online via live online classes. So it was like you'd go on udemy.com and you'd sign up for a like 1 hour tutorial on Excel, or you'd sign up for a 1 hour tutorial on history or something like that. We had no idea what verticals were going to resonate. We had no idea at all. We were assuming it was going to be live online classes, not recorded. And in fact, my co-founders had spent like over 2 or 3 years prior to when I joined. They had since shut this down, but they had built this like really advanced version of Zoom for that time that was completely browser based. You didn't have to download anything, and that was super novel. And so that was the basis for the product. And obviously, as those of you who know what Udemy does, like, know that we had to completely change basically all of those assumptions. The kernel of the idea stayed the same, but the execution completely changed.
So I didn't realize that the kernel of the idea of Udemy in the early days still resonates with the kernel of the idea of Maven in terms of live education.
Yeah, it does.
How much intention was it for you to, we'll come into Maven in its full, but maybe while we're there, if you want to describe Maven in a couple of sentences, what it is, and then I'm curious how that came forward from Udemy or not.
Yeah, Maven is a place where you can learn core skills for your job from experts. And we've recruited the best experts in product management, AI, leadership skills, and they offer, 2 to 4 week cohort-based programs live on the internet where you can learn a core skill. And there's like hundreds of skills, and the experts are really kind of amazing. I think it's probably our secret sauce. You have people who are product leaders at OpenAI, like literally. You have people who work at Google and Meta, and then people who also have been, C-level at smaller companies who teach on Maven and offer online programs that help professionals like learn skills that they need to be successful at their jobs.
And almost a decade after Udemy starting this cohort-driven education platform, was it an itch that you were still wanting to scratch, or was it seeing a space in the edtech marketplace where you felt like you could create some leverage?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is that I just personally am just so passionate about education because when I was a kid, I like was only really felt like I was good at one thing, which was school.
Mm.
And then sometime around high school, I started to see that the emperor had no clothes and started to really question school. So I had this massive shift in my life where I was like the star student and then went to being an extremely rebellious student. Like I probably attended 50% of high school classes by the time I was a senior. Like I was extremely bad. I still did really well in school. And so that just made me distrust school even more because it's like, well, you're telling me you need me to attend, but then I'm actually not attending. I'm getting the same results as everyone else. So what the hell is going on? And, basically that made me very frustrated with the education system. I went to college where I had a very similar experience. I sat in lecture halls like this and I was on my computer most of the time playing video games. And, I did okay still. And again, I just felt like, okay, well, this is totally broken. So I've had a lifelong itch to disrupt college, basically. And ideally, eventually the K-12 system, although I feel very strongly the K-12 system cannot be changed through business. I think it has to be changed by politics. So I'm actually involved in local politics in Oakland. We're going to be doing a bunch around the school board this year. So that's the avenue of change for K-12 and for college, et cetera. I think I've always just had this itch that like, we can do this so much better. Like the modern universities, and everyone always defends them because people went to these schools and there's no question they provide some value, but the value that they promised that they could provide versus the value they do provide is extremely divergent. And so it's kind of like saying like, well, our K-12 programs still have some students who graduate knowing algebra. Yes, but the majority don't. And with college, I feel like the vast majority of college is completely underutilized. And so I believe that our kids or young adults deserve a lot better. So I'm kind of on a lifelong mission to solve that problem.
It strikes me that you have an itch to disrupt college and also you're a glutton for punishment, because I look at the industries that you have tackled and they are all notoriously difficult.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge, honestly, like something that I worry about a lot, which is like building a SaaS product would just make me so much more money and be I'm not saying it's easy because actually it's extremely difficult to build any type of company, but I think the financial and the growth, we talk about growth, like the natural pull of like business productivity products are just so much higher than education where you're going up against a highly regulated industry that has a bunch of sort of cultural coding essentially that works against you. And so, yeah, it's something I think about a lot. And I've thought about how could you change that? And I think we've done that with Udemy. We did end up building a really big SaaS product. The multiples and the valuations didn't get there for Udemy. Like they kind of, we thought it was going to become a $10 billion company. It ended up becoming a $1 billion company. And so I still have some processing that I'm doing about the reality, which is like, yeah, it's been a really fucking hard market. Like education has just been honestly kind of horrible. And at the same time, like it feels like necessary that someone goes and works on this problem because it's so important.
Most of you all have heard me talk about it, but I used to run a restaurant. And after I sold the restaurant, somebody said, it takes about the same amount of work, like within a couple standard deviations, to run a brick and mortar restaurant where you're earning your margins off of avocado toast and coffee versus selling SaaS or whatever software. and the margins on software are substantially more. And it definitely had a feeling of like, I wish someone had mentioned this to me when I was getting started. But as you say, I believe passionately that humans need third places, that restaurants, that cafes, that places where people gather, including museums, are necessary. And so it's, what kind of difficult problem are you going to solve?
Yeah, and you can't force it. Like, I don't know that I'd be very good at building a SaaS product, honestly. Like, I don't think I have the underlying desire or skill sets that I see in my fellow, SaaS product CEOs. And so, candidly, like, I was put on this earth for what I think I'm good at. I'm going to do what I think I'm good at, and I've had enough, success that I'm not going to complain, of course. But I think it's always a combination. Like, there's that term ikigai that's gotten really popular, but like, it's a combination of what you're good at and what makes, pays the bills, and you can't ignore either of them.
So you mentioned operational and legal hurdles. I think Lyft and your era at Lyft is a particularly interesting example of that. What was it that you did at Lyft? And for my personal context, I have a sweet spot here too, because I, for 3 months or so, drove Lyft in San Francisco in the earliest days when there were giant pink mustaches on the fronts of cars.
Yeah.
So, what did you do at Lyft? And then we'll get into the product market fit that Lyft had.
Yeah, so the Lyft founders, I knew them because they started their company Zimride at the same time as Udemy. So we didn't know each other like super close, but we run into each other at events, and we became friends. And so when they were starting Lyft, I remember a friend told me about it. And I think my main claim to fame with Lyft is just that I identified that it was going to be a big company before it was. Like, I don't think I actually contributed that much to Lyft. I think I was a good employee. I did my job, but or a good contractor. I was a consultant. But like, I think the reality is that I saw that that was the future. I wasn't the only one. There were about probably 10,000 people in the world at that point who had either tried it as a user, been a driver, or like tried to invest in it, right? It was still very, very early. Like, this was before Uber X existed. So Uber was just black cars, and it was like $50 a ride. And Lyft had only been in one city for 3 months, I think. And I reached out to the founders and said, hey, can I help out? I just left Udemy. I was taking a break. And when you're taking a break, I think one thing that I've done very well in my breaks is I've kept myself occupied without locking myself into a long-term decision too early. And so Lyft was a great opportunity to do that. And honestly, what I saw with Lyft was just insane product market fit. Like, it was crazy. Like, being inside of Lyft, you couldn't do anything wrong. I mean, as an employee, like, everything you did worked. It was wild. And like, I think the team was really good. I keep in touch with a lot of them. It's a very talented team. But the truth is, it wasn't more talented than any other team at a top tech company that doesn't do as well. And they had just incredible product market fit. And that was super interesting to me. And it helped me really see the delta between a company that's really resonating and a company that, in Udemy became a valuation wise, Udemy and Lyft didn't end up being that different in their sort of median valuation in the public markets. Still, Lyft was, I think, 5-6x bigger than Udemy. So still significant difference. Just to be clear, that's like $4 or $5 billion. This is a lot of money, right? However, Uber did end up becoming like, 30, 30, I think it's probably closer to 60 now, $1 billion, something like that. And so, there was a big market there that they were going after, much bigger than the market for education. And I think that really showed me a lot. And of course, I ended up starting a food company. It didn't work out, I realized. And so I did end up going back to education because I realized, like, look, even though it's not as big of a market today, I still believe long-term it can be. And I think AI might really blow this thing open. And it's been a big, big boon for our business at Maven. But the other thing that I got from Lyft versus, and Sprig was, hey, I got to do something I actually enjoy and that I like, not just something that has insane product market fit. And then hopefully eventually I'll find it.
To touch on Sprig a little bit more. So it was in this era where there were a handful of food delivery services. Food is so difficult, but also looking at you from the outside, we might sort of tell a story of like one hit after another. Co-found Udemy, you lead that to $1 billion valuation plus Lyft, now Maven. What what did you get wrong about Sprig?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, for the theme is true for all of the companies, which is that like, and for Sprig in particular, which is that like execution has always been really good, but execution isn't enough. You need to be right. That's like ultimately what an entrepreneur has to do. Like you have to be right. And the biggest problem with Sprig is we were just wrong about what we thought was going to be the winning play in the market. I mean, the winning play in the market eventually ended up being DoorDash, Uber Eats, Deliveroo, etc. It ended up being bringing people food and just doing the distribution layer, as opposed to making and cooking the food yourself, which is what Sprig did, and delivering it. Like our analogy at the time was we would be like Amazon, vertically integrated, provide a better experience, and they were eBay. And that eventually we thought the eBay model would fade and the Amazon model would win. And so we were hoping and betting on the idea that Sprig was going to be able to deliver better quality more consistently. We would eventually be able to expand the SKUs, and people didn't need that many SKUs in food. Well, we were dead wrong. I mean, the number one thing people wanted was larger SKU set, it looks like. And they were willing to pay more, which was a big thing. They were willing to accept a lower quality product. And all of that just for higher SKUs. And we got that wrong. And I think it's a real lesson in like, I don't know, like, are there other people out there who are right every single time? Like my understanding is generally no, but there are some people who seem to be batting closer to 100%. And then I think the other lesson, certainly from a venture capital standpoint, and as an entrepreneur, you are a venture capitalist with one bet, right? So you're still a VC of your own business with your time. And as an entrepreneur, I think of it as like, okay, like being right is so important. Like it is the ball game. And we were wrong. We were close. There ended up being like multiple $10 billion companies in that space. Just we were wrong about how to do that.
I'm fascinated by the pattern recognition of knowing if something is going to work or not. So my little cafe was in the right place at the right time. The reason it's still around today and still called Robin's Cafe is because the mission in 2016 was on that upward slide, and we just got to ride the wave. There was a parking lot across the street that is now a kid's playground, right? How do you teach, or what advice would you give to somebody looking for the pattern recognition, whether that's in tech or in a completely different field, to say, or somebody transitioning into a new career, right, into a new industry, or to leveling up their career in some way, to look for what might be the next thing that hits, because it does make such a big difference if you catch the wave rather than as a surfer get crashed by the wave.
I mean, I wish I knew that in like I think there are lots of books written on this, 0 to 1, by Peter Thiel's kind of the canonical book of the subject. I think that it's very hard, first of all. Like it's easy to say it in retrospect. It always sounds logical at the, in hindsight, but in foresight, it's basically impossible. But you can study it. I mean, one of the things I see a lot with people who don't found companies, but who work at companies is they're completely illiterate in this topic. Like shockingly illiterate in this topic. Like I consider my memory to be pretty bad, and I still can name like 20 marketplaces that were successful. I can tell you why they were successful, why they failed. Like I can tell you, the specific go-to-market strategies. I can tell you the competitive dynamics that happen. For example, with Kickstarter, GoFundMe, and I'm forgetting the name of the third company that was there, but it was huge. Started by Slava. Anyways, Indiegogo. There we go. Indiegogo. So like I can tell you exactly what happened in those competitive dynamics because I study them. Like, and I'm constantly watching what's happening, and that pattern recognition I think helps. Now, it doesn't get you to a 10 out of 10. It gets you to like a 7 or 8. From there, it's instinct, and I think it's instincts. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's luck. It is luck in a sense, but the reality is like, you want to play the game with the feeling that you could be right. And if you leave it up to luck or chance, then you take out agency from it. So I'm very reticent to do that. But
I think a
yeah,
lot about increasing Lux surface area.
yeah, I think a lot about that too. I think that's really important. How many shots on goal do you have, et cetera. But, in entrepreneurship, for example, or product development of any sort, if you solely focus on Lux surface area, the first thing you would do is just launch like 20 different businesses. But I have never seen someone who launches 20 different businesses like be successful with that strategy on its own. They then had to pick one with limited but good information and then double down on it and then go after it. And I think, that points to the reality, which is, and by the way, limited information. So you didn't know it was going to be successful. You had an inkling, it was more attractive to you. The early signals were slightly better than the other options. So Lux surface area is part of it. But you do need focus at times as well. It's a balance.
What did Udemy get right about online learning, and what did it get wrong that you're trying to change or trying to fix at Maven?
Well, we were dead right about the video-based learning and skills-based learning being the future. I mean, there was an explosion in the 2008, 2023 era, 22 of video-based learning companies, meaning video-based learning, meaning in my definition is like you pay or don't pay, but the student is basically spending time watching content on the internet and consuming that content, learning on their own. And it was not obvious that was going to be the future. Like that is not where investors were investing. That is not where most products were being built at that time. And we got that right. The thing we got wrong, I think, or that we never fully achieved, and I think we could have achieved it, is that we did not recognize how hard it was going to be to create system change. And like the goal with Udemy was always to change college. It's like to replace college. And I think for probably like 10 or 20 million people in the world, we probably did replace college. Like there are a set of people, particularly internationally, who decided to become autodidacts. They learned on the internet and they never switched. They never needed to go to college. So there was a set of people for which we did that. But the people we didn't do that for was the mainstream, like sort of zeitgeist. We never got there, and I think that's what I hope to achieve with Maven, is for the average everyday person to say, like, I don't need college anymore. Like I could use this alternate path, and this alternate path's actually better. And that's what we're ultimately trying to create.
I'm curious that you said video-based learning was an era 2008, and I was expecting you to say 2018 or right something that was shorter than like to almost last year. What changed in 2003, 2000 or 2023, 2024 that you say that era is over?
Well, I extended it to 2023, 2022 because COVID really kind of added a little shot in the arm towards the end. I think that video-based learning was already on the decline. Consumer spending in the area was already flattened, basically. And then we just kind of had this like weird bump for 2 years. And so I think it's right to say that probably around 2018 or 2019, it was clearly like no longer you couldn't start a new company in video-based learning and be successful. But I think that is not the same thing as like, it's not dead, right? Like there's still more people doing video-based learning than any other type of learning on the internet, pretty much, right? Like I would argue there's more people learning via video than there are people learning via text on the internet, right? In terms of longer term, in-depth learning. That's crazy. Like think about that. Like that's a crazy shift. Like it used to be that textbooks were the thing, the center of learning, right? And that totally got disrupted. So it's still reality. It's still, Udemy still does like $700 million of revenue a year. Like it's no joke. Like, and so, and the Coursera Udemy combined entity, just so those of you who might have missed this, Coursera bought Udemy. That's why I'm talking about Udemy as though it's in the past, right? Because in my mind, it is the corporate structure of Udemy is now dead. The deal hasn't closed yet, but that's basically, that happened late last year. And so Coursera Udemy combined is like, whatever, probably 1.3 billion dollars of annual revenue. Like that's serious business. So video-based learning is still alive and well, but it's not growing anymore. Not really. And so at least as a paid product. So that's probably the change.
And you said earlier that AI has the potential to radically change, I mean, learning on the internet, but this era of video-based learning, right? And in some ways maybe could catapult Maven into stratospheric difference, right? Impact, hearing that's what really drives you. What is changing with AI as regards learning?
I mean, it's just part of the internet's exponential. So, in 2000 or whatever, I think there was 80 million users on the internet. It's kind of the stat everyone says about the .com era. And then in the 2010 era, it's like, we got to a few billion people on the internet. But workplace productivity on the internet was still, a fraction of what it's going to be post AI. The percentage of your work that will happen via technology and the number of jobs that will be affected by technological disruption is I think on an exponential. So what AI is doing is presenting an upskilling need to a much wider audience, because first of all, more jobs are being affected by it. Like lawyers didn't really need to learn much about the internet until now. And now, like if you're a lawyer and you don't learn AI in the next 10 years, like that's going to be challenging, right? Like that's a challenging situation to be in. They pretty much are all learning it right now. And that's true for accountants. That's true for doctors. Like most of these professions have barely been using the internet. And now, and yeah, they use email and they use docs. I get it. But like truly like changing your workflow, changing your work product was not significant until AI. And now AI is going to do all of that. And then existing internet workers, which is most of the people in this room, are also now seeing that our own work is going to get much more usable through AI. And so I think that there will be a massive need to upskill across, for those of you those people are willing to do it. And I think that's going to be a huge boon to education. Now, you'll notice what I didn't say is I don't think AI actually is going to be a very good teacher. And it's funny because like the best example of AI in education right now and actually used and effective is this company called Alpha School, or really it's a company called Khan Academy. And what they're doing basically is they're building an AI-enabled education platform for K through 12. And what they're showing is that if students and kids are using AI for 2 hours, an AI-powered education platform for 2 hours a day, they can learn more than kids who are in school for 6 to 8 hours. And by the way, no homework. So like no homework, right? So 2 hours a day, you learn more and faster and you have better test scores than people who spend 8 to 12. Arguably, I spent 12 as a kid, like doing schoolwork. That is wild, right? So it is changing. But if you ask the founder or the principal, he calls himself principal, it's essentially the CEO of Alpha School. If you ask the CEO of Alpha School, how much value does AI provide to their education system? He'll say 10%. Wait, what? So why does he say 10%? Because 90% of the problem is still the same problem we've had since time immemorial, which is motivating students.
What do you do? Well, what are the stats on people who buy courses, not on Maven, but on the internet, and then don't finish them?
Yeah, it's like 4 to 10% of people finish their course. Now, completion is very complex. You could potentially take, just like I told you, I was a student in college and didn't attend all classes and still had, still learned some of the material. Like you could potentially watch like 5 of the 20 videos and potentially get everything you need. I don't know. But that's the argument that a Udemy, employee would make. But I think that there is 4 to 10% points to a real problem. It's sort of like it sits on the shelf for a lot of people.
How many of us have bought a course off the internet and not finished it? More than
better question. How many people have bought a course off the internet and not gotten value from it? Yeah. It's about 80% of the people raise their hand, and then 90% of people raise their hand in the first place. So that's crazy, right? That's the real important thing. And I think it's something we're trying to fix at Maven. For us, I think the percent would probably be inverse. So you would see less than 20% of people raise their hand.
Yep.
Of the people who had taken it, just to be clear. And that's pretty amazing. But we have to convince a lot more people that it's worth doing, because it takes time and investment to go and take a Maven course. And it doesn't take time and investment to buy a Udemy course. It takes time to do it, but doesn't take time to buy it.
How have you tackled the motivation problem at Maven?
You mean the motivation to buy it, or the motivation to like complete it?
Complete it.
Well, a very, very simple solution. We use humans. All of our courses are taught by human experts. Those human experts are live on a call. And, if you have a live call on your calendar and you know that after it's done, you're very unlikely to like go back and rewatch it, you're much more likely to do it. And then the other thing we do is we charge, it's like, average price point of Maven course about $1,000. So those two things mean that we're for serious people who actually want to learn the skill. And they combined have really made a huge difference. The retention rates of and engagement rates of a Maven course are like 80 to 90%. That's 2-3 week retention rates. Whereas Udemy, it's they don't ever report this data. They closely guard it, but at MOOCs in general, video-based courses in general, we're talking 10% tops.
I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then we're going to open it up to all of you. Most of these are very selfish as a founder to a founder. What is the playbook for founder-led growth in 2026 and in this era of rapid change, in this era of AI?
I think the real playbook is the high level playbook is you need to take full ownership over the growth of your company or every aspect of your company. And I think all the talk about founder mode is really about that. It's like someone has to hold the bar and move relentlessly towards success in order for an organization to achieve anything. And that's true. I see that in local government. Like I said, I do a lot of work in Oakland politics. If you don't have someone who is just charging forward, nothing happens basically. And that's why like 90% of governments, by the way, do nothing, right? Your city, local government, they don't accomplish anything because there is no one with the courage and willingness to just sort of move things forward. That's why you get kind of no results. And it's so interesting to watch in government because, it's the canonical example to some extent of lack of movement. And so the opposite is true with founder-led sales. You need to take full responsibility of every function in your company. And so what are the tools at your disposal in 2026? You have, your network. You have reaching out to your network and leveraging it in a really thoughtful and smart way. You have social media. You have direct outbound. You have you should be on sales calls. You should be negotiating contracts, right? Like there are so many. I think the point of founder-led sales is actually that depending on your situation, you might use a different tactic, but you should absolutely understand that that is your job. That is the most important thing.
How should I, as a founder, decide what to focus on, given all of those things that you just said, but also that we know the need to really focus down? Niels, who I called out, who's in EdTech, focuses on founder-led sales on Twitter because he's found that that's the platform that works, right? 95% of my business at Zander Media comes through direct referral. It's just word of mouth. And if I can optimize for word of mouth, I succeed. And if I can't, I fail. So how do you decide, how do you coach founders, builders to focus on something, to test it, right? And to decide as soon as possible, okay, this isn't going to work. I'm going to go try a different path.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of like general advice, but it's actually very hard in practice because, every day you're like looking at signals and you're like, is this working? Is it not working? Is it working? Is it not working? Like I had a funny thing on X recently. First of all, my ex mojo just kind of declined as I focused on LinkedIn. And so occasionally I post on X. I had a 1.1 million view post 2 days ago. And then yesterday I had a 600 view post. Like, so I can understand why it's hard to, on a daily basis, evaluate whether or not something is working or not. And your job as a founder is to figure out where do you think the most leverage is in your business, and then to attack that and to decide whether or not it's existential for you to figure this out, or whether or not you're going to spray and pray and figure out which thing is going to be the model. And every type of business has different leanings. So a consulting business is typically a word of mouth business. That is the canonical sort of like example of a word of mouth business, because you're selling yourself. And when you're selling yourself, people are very unlikely to believe that they should buy from you solely based on what they see from your product or your website or whatever. They need to know that they need to have trust. And that level of trust rarely comes from anything other than referral. By the way, it can come from social media because it's a different type of trust building. You build trust direct as opposed to indirectly through referrals. So every business has a different model by which it grows. And you have to figure out what that is. And then you have to figure out the edge of what you're going to do differently from what the last model was to innovate on it. Because, in education, for example, it's a high marketing business, but the type of marketing that has worked over time has changed. And that's also important to recognize.
Any last advice on AI, right? It sounds like you are neither doomer nor utopia futurist, but what are you seeing in the next, I don't know, whatever period you think you can see out, 3 months, 9 months, in terms of what is the future of business? What is the future of careers? What is the future of starting a company, given the rapid changes we're seeing in AI?
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm a total AI utopiast.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if that's the right way to say that word, but like, I absolutely believe that it's going to change everything. I believe that is going to be monumentally beneficial for humankind. And I believe the future is coming. I am keenly aware of the limitations of where it can be used. And I think the speed is also completely it's over exaggerated, because the model companies have a serious, they are the people everyone looks to learn about AI, but they also have a serious incentive to talk about as though moving faster than it is, because that benefits their adoption curves as well as their stock price. So it's easy if you're running the model company to say we're going to be in AGI in 6 months, and they've been saying that for 3 years. Like that's, first of all, that's a ridiculous statement. If you actually use AI every day, like that's crazy. Like, it has not been growing at that speed. It has not been improving at that speed. But there are major thresholds that are happening every 6 to 12 months. And when those thresholds happen, they are changing. They're going from, I could use this tool, now it's definitely, you have to use it. And coding is a great example. But even with coding, like, I think there was a study recently that Cursor, it's like, like one of the top 5 AI companies for coding, probably top 2 or 3, like they only use AI 30% of the time when they're coding, right? They're still writing code. And like all this, I don't believe the Cloud Code team, honestly. I don't believe it. I mean, I'd be very curious what they mean by 100% of this was written by Cloud Code, like what they actually mean by that, or if that's a marketing tactic. I think it's more marketing. So that's my thing. So what does that mean for everyone? What that means is, like, don't freak out, but learn it. I mean, you have to learn it. Like, I don't think it's going to change. I don't think we're all going to disappear tomorrow. But if you look at this as the next revolution, right? So there's the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the technology revolution, the internet revolution, and now we have the AI revolution. I think that's real. So what happened? Well, 98% of us were farmers. Now 2% are farmers, right? Like, that happened. That's real. That will happen with AI. It will be that, and it won't be, I don't think it's going to be for all of society because it doesn't affect physical labor that much until robotics comes in, which is still feels like it's a little bit out. But like, you know, for knowledge workers, I think it probably will be a shift of, you know, whatever, majority are not using AI and are doing knowledge work direct from their brain to a majority are AI enabled. And so you want to be on the right side of that curve. I think that just makes sense. But again, I have an incentive to say this because I'm teaching people how to use AI, right, at Maven. So, you know, you can take that for what it is. But I don't really see the logical argument for freak out, to be honest.
All right. I can keep asking questions forever, but I want to open it up. So yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks. So the question's about why people should learn on Maven. I think Maven today, I think we can confidently say that we are the best place to learn how to upskill on the topics that we teach. So why should you care about that? Well, your world is constantly changing. You are either gaining scope, you're changing roles, the world is changing around you, and like what you learned in university 20 years ago is no longer useful in keeping up. And so the reason why Maven exists is every year or two, everyone here needs to learn a new skill in order to meet the moment that is in front of them. And Maven brings the experts who have done that over the last decade to you to allow you to help you learn that skill. And so whether that's executive communication or AI product management or Claude Code, like everyone here, like even myself, like have to learn new things to keep up with the growing demands of our work. And for experts, Maven is a platform where those experts can directly reach people who want to learn the things that they know and can monetize. And like, you know, as a simple example, we shared recently, like last year we had multiple people who made like $4 million as experts, like in a year, teaching on Maven, because they're teaching something that's super in demand that people really want to learn.
Yeah, Jackson.
Yeah. I'll answer the first part first, which is, you know, AI to me is beyond knowledge. The internet provided ubiquitous access to knowledge, right? You could basically find any information anytime, even before AI. AI provides a processing power on knowledge that is actually really powerful. And that processing power is what you now have at your fingertips. And I think that's just like a little bit of an edit to what you asked. And so the question is, okay, what skills are persistent throughout that, you know, as that processing power exists? And I personally think there are still a ton of human skills that are persistent, right? First is, of course, just the basic tool skills. And it's not just about being able to use Claude Code, it's about being able to ship things into production. It's not just about knowing how to use a AI tool to create an image. It's about redesigning your entire design workflow so that it's much faster because you understand not just how to use the tool, but how to change literally like the job functions and the communication between employees that occurs in your design process. So because AI is a processing tool, you have to redesign your processes for it. That's key. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to create leadership skills that AI cannot replicate. AI cannot interact with humans. It can't be up here on stage. It cannot do founder-led sales, right? And so like all of the executive communication and marketing and taste skills that one needs are just more important than they've ever been. And then finally, there are a number of strategic things that AI is not very good at. AI is not going to be right about the future. It doesn't have enough information yet. I think we're probably a long ways away for it to have the same amount of information that a true, like, really genius entrepreneur has, right, at their fingertips. And so as a result, I think being better at things like product sense, being better at business strategy, are skills that I feel like I said earlier, like most people are kind of illiterate at the skill, honestly. And even most like very successful knowledge workers who are ICs, I think once you get to the executive level, everyone knows this. But to get from the IC to the executive level, you have to become literate, highly literate in corporate strategy. And by the way, Maven doesn't teach that skill yet, so that's a good idea. I should add it. But just so you know, I'm not talking my own book. Like I literally named, like, that's not on Maven today. Maybe it should be. But
Another question. Yeah, Jesse.
yeah, I think AI provides everybody with a personalized coach. And so there are a number of benefits to that are um, they're underexplored and underappreciated today. The example I gave you in K-12 is an example where they leverage AI to personalize the education. So the education itself hasn't changed that much, right? You're still using videos and content and games and stuff for kids to learn, but the pace is determined by an AI that knows where you should be at any given time, and it doubles down in areas that you're weak at and identifies them and sort of forces you to do them. That's what the AI does. That's what I said about how AI isn't really changing knowledge. I mean, it is, but that's not the real amazing part. It's the processing. So AI allows a tutor, like, to build a computer system that can process where you're at and customize what knowledge it delivers to you. And that's what's so special. And so I absolutely think that's going to be huge. I think that for specialized knowledge, it's still it's a long ways off. So when you're learning something like algebra or geometry, fantastic. This is generalizable knowledge. Even coding, like, everyone, goes through the same, like, gauntlet to learn these skills. Like, I think that's what AI is going to be great at. It's going to be great at objective stuff, but there's a ton of non-objective, subjective stuff, taste-based stuff, etc., that it's still fairly weak at. Like, it's still a very bad writer. Like we try a lot to write my LinkedIn post via AI, and it's just impossible. Like, it's so hard. And, like, I'm so much faster than it right now. Maybe in a year or two, it'll get to that point. I don't know when it's going to happen. But for now, AI is really good for generalizable skills.
Last question.
Oh my God. Well, it depends on the day. Lots of things. I mean, for me, I think, so I'm an AI optimist, right? But being an optimist still means that there are many paths for being right about AI. And I am kept up at night about whether or not I'm right about what the future is actually going to look like, and whether or not I'm building the right thing to meet the demands of that future. And I think that, sometimes that creates anxiety, and it's a more negative feeling, and sometimes it's a more positive feeling, but that's, like, one of the things that keeps me up at night. And then, like, all the standard stuff, like, I screwed up in that meeting yesterday, and, like, I was kind of, I need to have a hard conversation that I'm putting off, or, like, all of the standard management things that I don't think are ever going to go away in life, like, also keep me up at night. But those go away once you solve them, which is great about those things.
All right. We are at time. Thank you very much, Gagan. Please join me in giving a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the engagement, everyone. I really appreciate it.